Woman Jekka, everyone. Um, Good evening and welcome to this panel discussion on youth arts practices and the future of work, micro-credentials of 21st century skills. I'm Dr. Tammy Wong-Holbert, Senior Lecturer, School of Art, Masters of Arts, Arts Management, specialising in curating, and also one of the research team members in the Vital Arts Skilling Young People for the Future ARC Linkage Project. So Vital Arts is a team of researchers comprising of Associate Professor Scott Brook, who's over here from RMIT University, Professor Peter Kelly from Deakin University, who I think is online with us today, Dr. Kristen Cornell from Creative Australia, Dr. Remy Khan, who is at NUS but returning to RMIT, and Chloe Powell, who's here today from RMIT University. Sophia Hartley has been also part of our team, and Professor Anna Hickey-Moody, who is actually from Maynooth University and RMIT, and she is online with us today as well. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurrung and Bunurong language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations as the traditional owners on the unceded lands on which the university stands, and respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to respectfully acknowledge any First Nations people we have with us here today. I'd like to welcome our panellists, Dr. Denise Stanley with Reese Cassidy from Clock Your Skills, Adam Simons, clock expert and musician, artist and data analyst here, Claire Chin, who is representing the Push, and Everin Sen, who will be speaking on behalf of the Centre for Multicultural Youth and is also our PhD candidate. And we're here today to share our perspectives from creative arts, educational and youth arts perspectives. So today we're focused on how creativity can unlock opportunities for young people who are often left out of formal education and training pathways. This event, Youth Arts Practices and Future of Work, invites the public to explore micro-credentialing and how it can potentially be used. The Vital Arts Project aims to recognise practice-based learning through certification employed to recognise the value of 21st century skills, which are developed through youth arts, and we turn these skills into stepping stones towards potentially meaningful employment futures, skills such as creativity and problem solving. These are increasingly life skills needed to navigate our rapidly changing, technologically driven society. This event is an outcome of our ARC linkage project, Vital Arts, and our educational partner in this project is Clock Your Skills. This project began during the pandemic, and we've just reached a milestone. We've just completed our co-design workshops with our arts industry partners just this Tuesday, actually, with our last partner, Gippsland Art Gallery. So together we are developing a suite of youth arts micro-credentials that can reflect the skills acquired through participation in youth arts. And today we're honoured to have Dr. Denise Stanley, the founder and director of Clock Your Skills, speak on valuing invisible skills. Micro-credentials can be a way of acknowledging that young people what they already know and do, especially those who have learnt through lived experience, creative collaboration and community participation rather than in traditional classrooms. Whether it's directing a short film, curating a zine, leading a dance workshop or producing music in a bedroom studio, these practices build essential 21st century skills: communication, problem solving, teamwork, leadership and digital legacy. Today's event highlights how arts-based micro-credentials can create real pathways into employment, further study and civic life for young people facing barriers such as poverty, racism, disability or displacement. I'm going to hand over to Professor Anna Hickey-Moody, who's actually on the call at the moment, and she's just going to speak a little bit about how we plan to work with our partners, Clock Your Skills, and also a little bit more about 21st century skills as well.
I want to say that we are building pathways into work with a range of different employers who are people that have diverse skill sets. So they're looking for people who are able to adapt to unpredictable situations, that are able to engage with situations that might seem unorganised or unexpected. They're used to people who can work with, they need people who are used to working in teams. And often traditional graduates that will take university pathways and not these employees. So the building those pathways in non-traditional ways is something that big corporations in Australia have been looking to do. And it looks like the graduates from our micro-credential program are really meeting those needs at the moment. So that's one of the outcomes of the projects that we're feeling positive about. The micro-credential sort of sets, we have 3 that we've developed, from beginner to experienced to advanced. And they are, we're working with the World Economic Framework's 21st century skills umbrella. And we're looking at critical thinking and collaboration and trying to accredit practical know-how. And so they have been, Steve, I think will talk more about this, but across field work and co-design with our industry partners, we've looked at which 21st century skills are displayed, and then we have we've come up with sort of the performance qualities that tie together the young people in our field work site. That's an overview of the code, the intention of the co-design process. I think Steve will talk a little bit more about the how-to of the co-design, and then I suppose an outline of what the employees, the employers feel the value proposition of the credits, the value proposition of the talent, for want of a better way of describing it, of the young people that we are working with and what they bring.
So I want to really take you on the journey that we've been on. So I've started with the first slide to say that Vital Arts, that group of people, assert that youth arts activities develop transferable skills. And Clock Your Skills makes these invisible skills visible and valued. And the micro-credentials will highlight non-formal learning to employer networks that's been recognised through this process. So I first want to say a bit about CLOC. CLOC stands for Collaborative Learning Open Curriculum Kit. What that means is you're not learning on your own, you're not watching a YouTube video, you're not an individual competing in a learning environment, you are collaborating with others at different levels. The curriculum is based on the community you're with and the context you're in, and the kit is the people and the platforms that we use. Okay, so we do 2 sets of programs. The first one is an international professional development program for work. So that's based on employed, self-employed and enterprises. And then we do life-wide and lifelong learning for non-formal learners at any age and any stage. So we will work with sector champions, leaders, competent practitioners. Our aim is to inspire, develop, grow, achieve and celebrate with people their skills. And our focus is life-wide and lifelong learning. And one of the tools that we have brought to Vital Arts is the CLOC Skills Discovery Workshop, which you'll find a bit more about as we go on. But one of the real goals of the CLOC community, which is international, is that people find what they love doing and find the tribe that they work with and build that into their career as they go forward. So I just want to share with you the community of practice model. The community of practice model is a very different model from most formal education. So rather than reading out those, they're on the screen. I'm just going to focus on a couple of them. So I think I'm going to look at number 2. So the focus in formal education is about teacher delivery, learner practice and study. In a community of practice, the focus is on being initially at the periphery of that community, at the edge of it, and the idea is to move to become a full participant in the center of that, and then potentially to go deeper to be able to support people with their learning, a kind of peer coach role. The other one I'd like to talk about is number 7, which is in formal education, you talk and learn about the relevant practice. And in the community of practice, you are just talking to other practitioners about practice. It's a completely different slice, if you like. And then I'll do the last one, which is 11, limited access to industry networks whilst you're on the programme, whereas ongoing access to industry networks within CLOC because you're in a community that's international with those connections and relationships. So where did this CLOC idea come from? Basically, it was a directive in 2012 that really inspired me to work in this way and inspired a lot of European employers and educators and youth providers, not only in the arts, but development. So in 2012, there was a directive that said every citizen has the right to have their learning recognised, validated and utilised for career and further learning opportunities. And this is the important bit, regardless of where it was acquired. So it could be acquired at any part of their life, not in a college, not in a university, not on a training programme, anywhere, at home with the family, through sports, through hobbies, through caring responsibilities, everywhere. So from that mission in 2012, we then built the programme, which was designed by employers. And employers were interested in people who were industry ready but still needed supervision, people who were competent practitioners that you could literally wind them up and let them go, whether they're employed, self-employed or running a micro enterprise. And then the sector experts who had significant depth and breadth of practice to be able to mentor and coach a wide range of other people. Since then, we have also added the industry champion, someone who has spent their life giving a legacy to industry or communities, and that is our PhD level, the CLOC industry champion or community champion. So that's a self-contained block of CLOC programs in workforce development. And then we realised the gap that has happened between education and industry, and we've designed a program to fill that gap, to close that gap, to build that ecology rather than ladder. And we've looked at CLOC Explorer, find that practice within a community that you love doing, whatever that is. Then you have the intrinsic motivation to develop the skills and become a regular participant, put the effort into learning in that community. And then the one that is the joiner is the CLOC trainee, where let's say the example is the guitar. So I've found that guitar is what I love doing. I have then developed those skills to the level where I can play the guitar. And I then can interview 12 CLOC sector experts who are all involved with the guitar. There might be a session player. There could be a guitar tech on stage tour. So you're interviewing them, go, what's your job? What's it like? What do you do? How much do you get paid? What do I need to be you? So how do I imprint myself to 5 of you to build my first portfolio of skills? And then by going through that process of research, activating, fine-tuning the skills for that first portfolio, they are able then, they've got their first portfolio of skills and their first network. And so they then go straight into industry ready, but still needs supervision. So it joins that gap up. So CLOC is the third way, providing recognition for non-formal learners. So higher education is a tested way. It's based in a community of practice, but that's a formal and academic community. TAFE is based in a community of practice that's a fusion of formal and vocational communities. But 3, CLOC is based in a community of practice that's relevant for that specific sector or interdisciplinary sector that you want to join and be part of and move from that periphery to the centre. So CLOC is the third way, that is for people who learn by doing in the context of any community of practice. CLOC was tested in different sectors but has begun in the creative and cultural, craft sector and creative digital sector. Ours is based on an industry peer review rather than assessment. And that peer review is international. You have to get peer reviewer 1 from the sector and the country you're in, and peer reviewer 2 has to be from the same sector in another country. So you can work beyond the policy of the nation state. Right, so let's look at how does CLOC recognise skills? So this is all within the context of vital arts now. So if you think the CLOC was designed by employers and freelancers in Europe, and it's now operating in Australia, New Zealand, UK and Saudi, and you achieve a CLOC award by demonstrating 3 skill sets: the practice that you have, sharing knowledge and skills, which is peer-to-peer learning, which operates in a community of practice, and the third one, which I haven't seen articulated in this way anywhere else, which we call developing social potential. And that's building social capital, that's accountability, it's responsibility, it's empathy, it's being a climate champion, it's identifying what that social capability is in your community and to welcome people into that community. So the Vital Arts project was, as Anna said, looking at these 21st century skills. So what we've done through the co-design process, working with the different partners and different arts organisations, is come up with what might be 3 ways of recognising the skills that they have acquired. And we're not looking at creative skills, we're looking at transferable skills. So the first one, through working with the facilitators of these youth arts providers, there is a commonality. They are all using a community of practice model, which is no surprise because each of the art forms operates as a community of practice. And what they could clearly articulate was, what is a settled new joiner? Now, a new joiner just joins, right? They may or may not stay. A settled new joiner has worked out how to be in the community, but they don't have the skills to actually engage at a deeper level. They're on the periphery, on the edge, right? But you can still say a joiner that hasn't settled has not achieved those skills. So it is a valid badge. It is not just, oh, you join this, so you get a badge. It is you are a settled joiner. You are a member of this community, right? Then the second one is you are a regular participant. You know how to engage and develop within that community. You are a member of that. And then the last one is where you become a role model for those regular members and those new members by the way you behave, by the way you support, by the way you go, no, we don't do that, just help, just put that over there, or actually clear up after that. Whatever the edges are of that community and the way they operate, the peer coach is there as that role model and that specialist member of that group. So all of those facilitators could clearly identify what skills are in each of those 3 areas. And so we can confidently ask for a facilitator witness testimony to say who is in which group. And we have articulated the skills so that we can map them based on their individual articulation. So that's the first method. The second method is one that I love, is the driving test. It does not matter where you learn to drive. You go and put in for a test when you're ready, and you take the test, and you either meet the conditions for that driving test license or you don't. And no one says you can't repeat it. My mother did it 7 times before she passed her driving test. And she never drove a car, but she had some theory that she could, if my dad had a heart attack, somehow she was going to drive the car. Anyway, so we all have different rationales for putting ourselves forward for various things, and we're all entitled to them. So basically, this standalone skills test is what we've been doing. So looking at working with participants from these youth arts organisations and taking 2 skills-based workshops that are roughly 15 minutes each. But what's most important is that that is followed by a guided reflection. And that guided reflection enables them to articulate really clearly the skills they have used in that activity. They are then hearing their peers who are in other groups also describing the skills they have used. And then what happens is there's a general conversation where things drop to a deeper level. And I'll give you an example where we had one of the workshops where one of the participants said in the reflection, I didn't trust this person because at school I've done something and I didn't trust him. And actually what happened in that group was they then began to look at the importance of trust. Now, bear in mind, these are 11 to 17-year-olds. So where does this conversation happen where people talk about trust in a collaborative project? Sometimes it doesn't even happen at university level. So this idea of being able to get young people to register their own voices and to articulate the skills is really important. And to have done it in a way where they're observed and they're also reflecting. And then they then go into the second one, go through the same process with different skills being tested. So, and then the third method is the Clock Skills Discovery Workshop that I've mentioned, which again is a group activity where people are giving examples of what they've done. And what we've been trialling is the use of AI in this process to see whether we could support this process in order to scale it to be able to run it online across wide rural areas and places that are disconnected and maybe not have a youth arts provider. We might be looking at youth activities they've done that might not be supported by a youth arts provider, but would have the same skills being used. So it's a very useful tool that we can. If you look on you can see the first prototype, you have got the badges then, and they're using the 21st century terms, so collaborator, you've got beginner, participant, specialist, the same with culturally aware, and the same with critical thinking. We're moving towards mapping the language of the users based on all the co-design work we've done, and also looking at, I've already looked at every chamber of commerce across Australia, the states, and identified the courses they've got on, which are either there because they think their local community need them or someone's asked for them, and looking at the language they use so that we've got a language register matching between young people and employers that's not mediated by formal education language. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you the opportunity to experience a bit of a clock skills discovery workshop. And I'm going to ask Reese to come up and to tell you a bit about that. And those of you who are online, you've got a link and you've got, obviously on screen, you've got the QR code. But I'm going to pass over to Reese. Thanks, Reese.
So I've been privileged enough to work with Denise over the last few months to go through the clock process. So I started off doing a skills discovery workshop here in Melbourne last year, and then I did another version of it online, and then went on to do the sector expert and peer reviewer as well. And through that process, I built some AI bots and apps to support me and then to support others in the process that we were going through. So I've had some great feedback so far. And what we've done is we've taken a lot of the data that was synthesized from the co-design workshops, and we've then trained the AI on that. And then in this instance, I've just made a small version of the larger app for you to actually try out tonight. So if you'd like to scan the QR code, and you can have a look then at this little app here that will kind of take you through. Now, this is an example that I've just done to show you, and I can show you just to let you know, if you do put your data in here, it will be reported in the chat log. So if you're uncomfortable with that, then that's obviously fine. But also it would be great to have you test it out, and also we can show some examples if people are comfortable with that as well. But you can see here that this is kind of the language that it's used. Now, it's kind of trained to be able to support youth and to be able to ask questions and really coach them. So it's really important for me when we're using AI that we're not removing the human, that we're actually augmenting the experience. And we're using AI for what it's good at in this instance, rather than pushing people towards something. It's actually pulling and working like a coach to kind of help them understand themselves better, to be more confident, to articulate their skills, and to be able to then have those conversations in person or online at workshops, to then be validated and supported by mentors and peers and so on. And so it's very much that collaborative, working with the technology and working with other people, and really highlighting the reflection piece that Bernice mentioned that often is missing from a lot of formal education. And is, as we all know, one of the most powerful aspects. So it's that personal ability to reflect and then articulate, and then also to be able to have feedback and then reflect with others as well. And so then we have that big reflection that happens where we have young people, identifying that trust is an issue, and then in the moment kind of working through that process and then coming out having grown from that experience. So yeah, have a go at that if you haven't already. That, like I said, is the QR code. So if you want to have a quick go. Now, it is probably a little bit of a process to because it will coach you through and ask you a bunch of questions. But you can see here, I just tested it out by doing something very simple. So obviously we've focused in vital arts on arts experiences, but I kind of just looked at this as, recently I had to help my daughter change her bike tire, and she was very easy to do it. She very much kind of locked onto something she wanted to solve the problem. I was at work and she was calling me on the iPad saying, "Dad, I need to solve this. I need to get this tire changed." And I was trying to coach her through that over the phone. I couldn't see the bike, I couldn't remember exactly the steps. I was giving her some steps that were probably a little bit wrong. She was getting frustrated with me. There's a lot of kind of things going on in that moment. And then when I got home, I could then support her further to kind of guide her through that. I was learning as well because it's, I don't change the tire every day. So I was kind of going through that, and then we worked out, what size we needed to get of the tire tube. We took that in to one shop. We realized we had the wrong one. We had to go back and get the right one. We had to then refit it and pump it up and put it all back on and replace the chain, get all greasy on our hands, all that kind of process. But now my daughter and I both know much better how to change a tire on a bike. And if we can jump over to the chat log now, I can show you this example a little bit more fully. So very quickly, because you'll be able to take this home and have a bit more of a go. But you can see here that there's some chat logs here where you can kind of take you through these different question prompts, and then take you through, just seeing if we can find the one about the tyre. Okay, is this one okay to show? Yes. It's okay, thank you. So my train line wasn't running, I needed to find a different way into uni. And then you can see the coach kind of then asks some questions. So it takes you through what's the situation, what's the task. So this kind of star model that I'm sure is very familiar to people. It's a great one for young people to kind of use as a framework to describe their skills to employers. Works really well in job interviews. And then you can see as we go down, it kind of validates and then asks to reflect further.
I'd like to introduce Adam Simmons. Adam is a data analyst, musician, artist, educator, curator and advocate active across Melbourne's dance, visual arts, theatre and music scenes, performing jazz, punk, new music, traditional Japanese, honkyoku, funk and free noise improv. Adam founded Ballarat's Festival of Slow Music and served as lead co-artistic director of the Wangaratta Festival of Jazz and Blues. In recent years, he co-founded Dingo, a national magazine celebrating Australia's jazz sector, completing his graduate certificate in data science here at RMIT, and making RMIT's Vice-Chancellor's list of academic excellence. Congratulations. And worked at global consultancy firms KPMG and GHD as an AI prompt engineer. He currently works as an analysis, data and insights at the Victorian Catholic Education Authority. So welcome, Adam. You've had a very colourful career. And I just wanted to get you to share your reflections on your very multi-skilled career. And perhaps speak to what Denise has presented on, but also in particular, something that I think you'd be very great at speaking to would be transferable skills in your career and how having that ability to move between different sectors has worked out for you.
Thanks, Tammy. Yes, I have done many things. And just looking at the list of partners, it's, there's a couple in there that I've been involved with, such as Back to Back Theatre many years ago,
yes.
or Creative Australia, lots of grant writing, but also being a peer assessor on the panels, so seeing both sides, advocating to them around some of the national cultural policy stuff.
Fantastic.
As well as the push, where in Ballarat, growing up as a teenager, there was the Ballarat Recreational Arts Team, which was supported by the push, and we put on events. And Battle of the Bands, Joe Camilleri, Painters and Dockers. I got to play on a stage with Painters and Dockers. We got washed out, the rain. You get that in Ballarat. But yeah, it's like the thing of the transferable skills clock. There's been experiences over the last few years that I have been able to reflect on in more formal ways. And even if it's about non-formal learning, clocks, there's a structure there that as an artist you don't always have when you're developing your practice. And so the Australia Council, now Creative Australia, but the Arts Leader program they had was a fantastic one, which helped me recognise some of the skills and the value that I bring as an artist. Again, something Denise pointed out about talking with practitioners. And the Arts Leader program was great because you were talking with arts leaders from all different sectors.
Yes.
And you're all kind of going, wow, you're amazing, what am I doing here? Yes. But you're sharing, even though you're from a different sector, you kind of realise that, we're all dealing with the same problems. And I do have something to offer on your circumstance. I have an understanding from my perspective. And if maybe I've learnt something here that might be useful there. And then a couple of years later, getting to do the clock sector expert was great because it actually named and quantified in a way those skills. And it maps it and you're going, right, this creative practice thing, the developing social potential, sharing skills and knowledge. These are all things, and I've got a thing on my Facebook that I've done that. Or there's that magazine or that CD. Or the fact that I've got an email where I'm trying to encourage a student to actually go for that thing. And you're actually, developing social potential just in a one-to-one private way. But then you're reflecting on it and going, yeah, that person, I've helped them, I can see where they've gone. And so that reflection on the things that I've achieved in some big ways, as well as that little boy that was trying to just help put on some gigs in Ballarat.
It's still part of you.
And seeing all of those things, that then when I had a COVID, disrupted everything and becoming quite disillusioned about the art scene and the art sector, and don't get me started. But it was about going, I actually have something of value. I've developed some skills. I can actually name them now. And I can see social potential, creativity, problem solving, innovation. They're core to what has helped me succeed. And it's not necessarily that I play a saxophone or have built a sculpture or that I've danced or played a rubber chicken. It's the things that I've learnt, the skills that I've learned in each of those. And it was, then I did a micro-cert at RMIT in business analytics. And I was able to bring all of that knowledge around, it's creative practice, but now it's digital practice. Developing social potential and the network, knowing I'm fresh in this, I need to develop a network. I need to put myself out there, speak to people. And so it was all the things I'd learnt kind of informally, just hanging out at gigs when I was a young man. And then slowly, many years later, with some language from Clock, helping me go, right, cool.
Yes.
Now I can do it with purpose.
Yes. And that is a good point, actually. I've had lots of interesting conversations with Denise about language registration. Did you want to make a comment about that?
Yeah, I think it is starting where people are, and it's the way in which people have the vocabulary to be able to describe what they do. And often we don't have that. If you go into academic practice, you can learn the language that's associated with that. If you're in a music or any arts context, you know the language of that. But what Clock enables you to do is to be able to look at each of those as transferable. And those three skill sets are transferable across every community of practice.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'd like to introduce Claire Chin, who's here representing the Push, and just a little bit about Claire. So Claire, since starting as a freezer volunteer at 15, Claire's 8 years' experience in the music industry now ranges from having been the previous local music programmer for Groove in the Move Festival, events producer and label manager at the Push Inc., and paralegal at Media Arts Lawyers. So Claire is at the forefront of Australia's emerging music scene and is frequently an industry panellist discussing young audience trends, local music collectives and booking accessible all ages music events. Now in her last year at law school, Claire is utilising her experience to pivot into a career in corporate law, where she will be completing her final legal clerkship with a New York-based law firm White & Case. And I think you were there today, weren't you? On top of this, she is also currently, studying at university. So Claire, my question for you is, can you tell us more about from your experience starting as a teenage volunteer for the Push? And if, in case you're not aware of what the Push does, the Push kind of really trains young people to produce music festivals and lots of big public events, and but is statewide, so their programs actually reach lots of different audiences, rural communities and urban communities as well. Can you maybe just talk a little bit from your own experience of the push programs and the journey it's actually taken you on, and where you are now and where you think you're heading, and how the music productions influenced the work you're doing now as well?
Yeah, 100%. I love the push. I'm like such a huge advocate for organizations that are actively helping young people, I guess, like identify their strengths and be able to connect them with other like-minded young people, and equip them with the skills to, I guess, enter into the music and entertainment industry. I think starting as like a teenager volunteering with the push, I don't think like anyone really imagines themselves like pursuing a music career. Like they really just want to meet, you know, other young people in their area and put on all ages gigs, you know, that are accessible, you know, with like local bands and everything. But just like from a young age and having access to those opportunities, you realize that, you know, there are people out there who want to actively support your development. And in addition to, you know, learning, I guess, like the soft skills of, you know, how to put on shows and, you know, I guess like liaising with booking agents and artist managers, you're also actively being inspired by those that are around you. And I think that is, you know, I think I want to say it's like a transferable skill. Like, you know, you participate in certain programs and it's that ability and willingness to be inspired by those around you is what I think allows you to cultivate your path forward. And so I think starting at the push when I was 15, you know, and seeing all these incredible people around me, I was like, okay, like maybe pursuing a career in music is, you know, really viable. And then, you know, obviously participating in these different programs, I eventually got to meet, you know, the head of music programming at Groove and the Move Festival. And by that time, you know, I was producing shows for the push, and I had actually been, like employed by the push to produce a lot of their shows at the Sydney Maya Music Bowl. And none of these things would have really come about had it not been for that active participation, you know, as a teenager. Like I didn't have any formal, you know, like diplomas, licenses or anything at that time. I was just like a high school kid that loved, you know, meeting new people.
A bit of training in music.
Yeah. And, you know, training like via the push that, is not like, you know, necessarily formal training, but training nevertheless that should be recognised. And, you know, a lot of us, you know, like part of the cohort, by the time that we were exiting high school and, you know, starting university, we were equipped with all these skills that we didn't necessarily know how to articulate, but it was recognised nevertheless. And I think when you, like recognise how your experiences can be formulated, you know, in a way that is relevant to your industry, that can, you know, open up so many doors. And I think it was during my time at Groove of the Move Festival like that I realised there were so many artist contracts in an artist career. Having also worked on the label side of the push, you also realise how foundational they are to building an artist's career. And that's kind of like how I pivoted into law. And I think when a lot of people hear my experience, they think, oh, like, you know, working in music, that is so different to, I guess, like the black letter law of things. And now I think pivoting from music and entertainment law into corporate law, like I'm still able to identify a lot of those transferable skills lying in the soft skills. So like the, you know, ability to converse with different kinds of people, to understand, you know, the direction that, you know, certain companies or organizations want to go into. Those are the kind of skills that you develop, you know, throughout your life. And I think you can bring with you in any sort of adventure or, you know, side quests that you go on. And I think just like the main conclusion that I want to sort of draw upon is that all your experiences count, and, you know, nothing is ever lost, you know, in your experiences. Sometimes you participate in things and you realize like, oh, maybe like, you know, that doesn't really resonate with me, but you're still constantly learning, and it's the knowledge that you attain from participating in these different programs.
Having curiosity about everything.
Definitely, yeah, and that's what I think sets you apart from other people and cultivates a path for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that's a great contribution. We have one other panellist here, Evram Sen, and Evram is actually here representing the work she does for the Centre for Multicultural Youth. But Evram is also our Vital Arts PhD candidate and has been for the last half a year, I think, more than half a year, isn't it, actually? And so, but Evram wears many hats. Evram has actually had a lot of experience in the youth arts sector, and, you know, also began as a teenager, beginning in theatre, formal trainings in theatre. But you've also had a lot of experience in community media, in particular with SYN Media here at RMIT, and you've worked on many different programs with SYN, including the culturally and linguistically diverse programs. And you've also worked your way all the way up to general manager until recently, and you're still continuing to do a lot of sort of work in that space with the Arts Centre and through podcasting. And so, Evram, I'd also like you to speak to your experiences from your many years in diverse art forms, and also in the context of the Centre for Multicultural Youth. And the Centre for Multicultural Youth is one of our industry partners that does use arts strategies, but they also have a lot of different programs to support multicultural young people. Would you like to speak a little bit about some of the creative strategies that you've used and skills in some of the key projects that you've developed over the years? There might be a specific example you want to speak to. And what other capabilities have been strengthened by your experience in diverse sectors of the arts, and how you see that yourself applying those skills to future scenarios?
Well, thanks, Tammy. Thanks, everyone. It's really interesting because, as everyone was talking, obviously, I think we're all kind of sharing experiences that are very similar or related. I started my youth arts journey when I started volunteering in community radio, and I was doing a master's in screenwriting at the time, and I remember everyone was like, why are you doing radio? And then I realized, though, the reason I enjoyed it, and this is the unique thing about what you were talking about before, Denise, to do with why youth arts is unique for 21st century skill development and all the stuff you've been developing, is that, like, I was doing degrees and things, but I still didn't feel like, I didn't feel like my potential was necessarily coming out in those programs. And it wasn't until I started participating in like a peer-led space with other young people who were also doing the same things as me outside a classroom or any sort of formal setting that I started to develop any type of leadership skills, transferable skills, all the things that actually got me my career, I learnt through doing volunteering and through youth arts programs specifically. And I know that sounds interesting because you're like, I'm doing a PhD right now, so that's formal education. But like, it's interesting because really everything I've learnt I've applied through informal learning. And so I think the peer-to-peer learning was really important and really important part of my journey. And when I started to develop the skills, like I would say the skills that really popped out to me were, communication, collaboration, being able to listen very deeply and being able to problem solve. Those things just popped up constantly and you would strengthen them. And because you're doing it with your peers, it was a way to naturally sort of strengthen those skills and learn from each other. And I think the thing that really stood out to me when you're talking about clock your skills in the framework is that you're applying this, you sort of like looked at what's already happening, and then you've articulated it into such a clear framework. But you're not necessarily, the thing that really stood out to me in the youth arts programs is that you're not imposing anything on young people to be like, this is how you should do things. It's just about what they're naturally already doing. And those things, I think, is what really brought out my strengths as a young person in these sorts of programs. The other thing so currently I work as a youth consultant at CMY, and something that I do is I work with organisations to help them, better include multicultural young people in their programs, etc. CMY also runs arts programs and various other things. But one of the things that we talk about at CMY is how multicultural young people are invisible leaders in their communities, and that's the stuff that you were talking about, Denise, where it's like the skills that are all outside any type of classroom or any type of formal learning, multicultural young people are doing all of those things with their families, with their communities. They've got those skills. And I think that through the process of being with your peers and being in a youth arts environment, those things come out and you start to realize that you actually do have those skills and they're being recognized and they're being supported to thrive in a way that doesn't go, oh, you don't know this. It's like, actually, no, you do already know these things, and let us like create the space for you. It's all about creating that space. And that's the thing that I think helped me grow as a young person, was having the space and then therefore having the peers to let you bring out those things that already were there. And that's what a lot of CLOC is about as well. And so I think youth arts programs are really uniquely set to do those sorts of transferable skills. And I would hope that, for example, in the future, that employers, they would be like, well, we've got all these people that we could be recruiting, but who's actually done that? Who's made a community radio show? If they did a community radio show, then we know that they can do X, Y, and Z. We know that they've got those skills to communicate with people effectively, to be really great at listening, to ask the right questions, you know. And I think the thing that came out probably the most for me is I just am able to step back and ask really big questions. And that's probably the one thing that I've seen the most, because when you're in the right environment, in the right type of sort of informal learning environment like that, you are encouraged to ask questions. And I think that's a thing that lots of classrooms or even just like formal learning programs don't do very well. And I guess I come from so I'm Turkish, and when I started volunteering in community radio, I went to some information session and they were like, oh, we have free training for culturally, linguistically diverse young people. And I was like, I guess so, it's free. Like, I just moved out of home, I had no money or anything. And then saying yes to that just opened up all these doors that I just could never have imagined in my whole life. And that's purely through having the right space, having the right people to bring those skills out of you, that I already knew how to do a lot of those things, but no one had sat down and said, no, you can do them, and given me the language to articulate them, like you said, and Denise as well. So it's just like, all those things are so fascinating to me, and obviously why I'm doing my PhD. But yeah, it's kind of all connected. And I think that one of the things that I also talk about with employers when it comes to multicultural young people is like, we put forward a problem. And it's like, what, you're working with a client and they want this and want that. What skills would you need, you know? And then I'm like, well, actually, multicultural young people have all those skills, and they actually already do all that stuff every single day in their life. And you might not recognise that, but that they actually are probably the best candidate for the job, because they already know how to do those things, because they're always navigating, always developing, always asking questions, because they have to. And I think that young people are in youth arts programs do that stuff every day too. So, yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to open it up to the floor, actually, if there are any questions for the panel. And that includes the people that are online as well. Yeah.
Thank you. That was super interesting. I was wondering, with the young people that you've spoken to, do you find that the being able to articulate and sort of demonstrate their skills in like a narrative way, like telling a story of those skills, has been equally as important as having the kind of micro-credential sort of certification of that particular skill? Like, do you find that they're kind of equally weighted when they're sort of going to pursue those employment opportunities, or what's that kind of balance look like, I guess?
So that's a very good question. So I can give you an example from CLOC. I asked a number of people what they did with their CLOC certificate. So they had a certificate initially for sector expert, which was a postgraduate certificate level. And I said, what did you do with your certificate? And I got 3 answers. 1, I stuck it on the wall because I've never had a certificate before. 2, I used it to get a pay rise with my employer. 3, I used it to top up to a full master's. So from that point of view, I think all of our CLOC programs, there is a possibility to top up to get a formal certificate because people want that option. But from an industry point of view, the clock badge, as it is in our setup, is recognised as an industry peer review process. And when we're thinking about vital arts, I think the reflection that happens in those workshops and also the facilitator witness testimony of where they are, not only shows them that they've met that level, but they are on their way to meeting the next level. Because I think what happens too often is that you've hit that and therefore it's done. No one is a level. People are different shapes in terms of the skills, and the skills discovery workshop demonstrates the profile where some people have got highly developed skills in these areas, and these areas have been less developed because they haven't been in a context where they've been able to develop that. And therefore we can proactively upskill. And we've done that in the London Music Industry Skills boot camps by looking at that. So I think the question is, how are we as a society looking at how you demonstrate value and skills? And I think for too long, the certificate has been the barrier rather than the value. And I speak to big employers who say, if you have 5,000 applicants for a job and you have got no way of really identifying the skills of people, except either through having them in an interview workshop day or by looking at what the traditional systems are. And so just talking to an employer yesterday, they were saying, we'd love to run the skills driving test as our employment interview process, because then you're seeing that happen and there's a facilitated reflection where people can name what they've done, but also sometimes where they've got that from. And then there becomes a trail. So the language register we talked about earlier is absolutely critical to this, because young people cannot articulate the skills unless they're being facilitated to do that and then enabled to reflect and identify, to get into that deep space where they start talking about trust, they start talking about the aspects of collaboration and the glue that holds communities together.
And we witnessed that the other day, didn't we, Denise, with the Gippsland Art Gallery young people, when they actually said they didn't trust each other.
Yeah, exactly. So where do you get the opportunity to say that in a way that's not like where it's actually a serious conversation that's considered and reflecting? And I saw the body language of the two people concerned change after that conversation. They went quiet and their body was processing what they'd heard and realising, both of them, the one who had not been trusted and the one who hadn't trusted, they were both reflecting on that quite deeply, and it changed the energy in the room. And then someone else was a bit uncomfortable and said something else to try and take the attention, but it didn't get picked up. Basically, they stayed with that space. And so seeing that happen in literally, you've got these young people from age 11 to 17 in this room doing these fun exercises, really engaging. They actually forget they're doing anything. They're just having fun. But they're able to have that serious reflection about what skills did you use. And their naming is very similar to, it's like, oh, I just figured that out. And what does an employer say? I just need someone who's going to figure that out. And so you've got that language register match, and that's really powerful.
And that's what we've done in the co-design process. We've mapped all the terms that the young people use, as well as, you know, the terms that we've also come up with. So we've got a whole vocabulary. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question in the audience?
Perhaps you might tell us about your PhD and how it relates.
Thanks. Essentially, it's been a bit of a work in progress getting everything to where it is now, but I'm happy with the direction of it. So essentially, we're going to do action research with podcasting as a method. So we're going to have a series of podcasts where we're going to have case studies, and then we'll be talking to youth arts organisations and people who run those programs and design those programs. So we'll have 3 case studies, and then we want to talk to alumni of those programs to be like, so how did that actually impact you? So what was the intended design and outcomes of the program and how it was designed, and then how did it actually impact that person that did the program and what did they go on to do. So we'll have 3 case studies with that, but from there we want to create a series of recommendations to assess essentially impact, which is going to be accessibility and reach of those programs. So how can other youth arts organisations learn from how these organisations have done things? What have they done well? What's worked really well in terms of like translating those skills and to those cohorts and who's come out of it? And then what recommendations do we have for other youth arts organisations so that they can also do it better and keep improving and like better communicate the impact of what they're doing essentially to funders and government and all those sorts of things. So it's going to be about young people who we talk to as case studies, like being able to translate, oh, this is what I went on to do, and then advocate, and then hopefully other young people will hear it and they can talk to them about what they did out of it, but then also the organisations themselves be able to like go, oh, we're doing that already, actually. We should be, this is a way to articulate what we're doing really well to funders and other organisations. So hopefully it can be useful for the organisations and the alumni that come out of the programs as well to have these recommendations and have this and I wanted to do it as a podcast because 1, I'm a podcast producer, but 2, I want it to be accessible so that like people can just take the learnings and then share it really easily with people who need to hear it, and then especially with their peers as well. So it's going to be like a sort of combination of those 2 things. So yeah. Thank you.
Actually, at the beginning, I thought you were asking about the clocktorate. Maybe Denise might want to speak a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so I think I mentioned at the beginning that one of the things that we've are doing is looking at PhD level for the industry champion. I'm going to tell you where that came from. When I stopped being a performer, I trained as a celebrant. And I did a number of funerals where I had to write the tribute of ordinary people who have all done something absolutely amazing and they never have the recognition because they're dead, or at least as far as I know. Okay, so they're not hearing that tribute. And so I had a conversation with the Vice-Chancellor of Middlesex University and said, people who've done amazing things but are never going to leave a library wing or loads of books, are never going to get an honorary doctorate, they're not a celebrity. So why are we looking at a way of doing a PhD that doesn't look at knowledge going into action, but rather looks at action going into knowledge, which is the way CLOC runs. We turn action into knowledge. But to take the legacy as the impact of a trail. And the way I talk about skills, bear with me, is like a river. So if you imagine your career having streams of experience coming in, and then your experience is deepening like a river, and then you get the depth and breadth of an estuary, that's CLOC sector expert. When that turns into a delta, where you can't recognise where everything has gone and the water is distributed, that is an industry champion or a community champion. And in a formal education, you could do a PhD through 12 reviewed papers or peer-reviewed papers, publishing them. So I'm drawing the parallel, or I was in terms of conceiving this, that if there were testimonials from people about the impact and the legacy of someone's thought leadership, someone's practice that is tangible and is evidence, that they could collect those across the 4 aspects of CLOC, so that you've got practice, you've got sharing knowledge and skills, you've got developing social potential, but you've also got an agency entrepreneurial aspect, and asking them to build that portfolio to then reflect on what, when you've seen how other people have used your work, Is that okay? Have they done it right? Have they done it wrong? Where's it gone? And how do you look at it now? And where are the gaps in what you are doing? And so the Clocktorate is like the literature review of your life's work.
Except
then,
not waiting until you're
and then
in the ground.
you then do a top up, because only a university can give you a doctor title. So you then do a 1-year top up, which enables you to take an aspect of your reflection more like deeper, and to do a piece of work with that university for a year in order to get that doctorate. Now, we only started that last year. We've got 2 people who have finished the Clocktorate, which is what we call our bit. And then we've got 1 who has just spent a year and is having in July, I don't think it's happened yet, his final discussion, whereby he can then just write up and submit in January. So in January, once that person has got their PhD, that is the last glass ceiling I wish to break in formal education. So, and there's someone following him from New Zealand who's like right behind him. And we've got another 4 ready to go in, and then we've got 12 following them. So this is an amazing moment when that happens, when that PhD happens. But when they were accepted, had a supervisor and went forward, that's again another milestone for us. But I wanted to break the level 3, which is the kind of the 18-year-old barrier, which is getting into TAFE or higher education. I wanted to break the master's barrier, and I wanted to break the PhD barrier. And my case study is, there is a guy called Frank Sweeney. He's a black guy from London. He's a carnival producer, theatre director. Is he on the call? Frank, you're on the call. I'm just talking about you. And he left school aged 10, and he is now doing the Clocktorate. He graduated with a full master's in August of last year. So congratulations, Frank. You're amazing. And we wish you well with a Clocktorate. Okay, so yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? No? I did actually want to ask Adam something, actually. I was very curious about your transition from musician artist, and I saw that you've actually had quite a successful career as a visual artist as well, like showing in galleries and even representation, and then it seemed, just maybe you could talk a little bit more about your experience of transferring into AI prompt. Is it prompt design, prompt engineering?
Prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering, and also data analysis, which is, it seems, quite unrelated, but I'm sure in your mind they work together.
Yeah, and it's, I've been thinking a little bit in the last week or so since being invited to be on this panel. I've been thinking about it over the last few years and longer. I've been trying to work out since I was a teenager, do I go into maths and science and astrophysics or quantum physics, or do I go into music and play free jazz? Sort of scrunky stuff. There's been different points where I've always done a lot of different things, but there have been different points where I've been able to see and go, they're just different aspects of the same thing. Doesn't always last. There's always the imposter syndrome and I'll never, but when I'm in a good spot, it's like, it's all me. And the idea of skills that can cross it's not even that they cross, it's just, it's me. I worked out I was an artist. And even as a data analyst, I'm trying to retain that notion of identity where I am an artist or more deeply a storyteller. And that arts is fundamental. It's not just a nice to have. It's not even kind of necessarily useful, but it's actually fundamental, I believe, to the development of us as a species and a survival. If we don't communicate, then we're probably going to steal the food from the other person and bash them over the head. Whereas if you communicate, share, art is great for doing that when you...
Can be beyond words.
So whatever I do, it's trying to go, as an artist, what am I doing? And it's just a different medium. And when I'm struggling, it's like, well, I don't have the craft here to articulate my idea. What's the craft I need to develop? What is the skill I need to develop? And so I was trying to jump to the data analytics. It was making a shift, going, oh, I've done lots of grant stuff. I've sort of played in Excel. I like numbers. I'll try data analytics. There was the digital jobs program, the Victorian state government, that had the 12-week micro-credential and 12 weeks of internship that I ended up at KPMG. It was just enough to sort of give me some support to try it. And it was trying to take back when I learnt shakuhachi, the Honkyo-ku music, Japanese Zen music, where I'd been playing saxophone for 20 years and now on this instrument, which is just a simple piece of bamboo, I couldn't make a sound. And I was just going, oh, beginner's mind. And at data analytics, it was like, oh, right, oh, where am I? Oh, beginner's mind. And I was able to tell it to my colleague who's doing data science. That's a big
part of it, being able to be flexible enough and actually also humble enough to go back to the beginning, I think, is a big part of the challenge, isn't it?
Not easy. Yeah. I'm not a young person, but I still feel young. And that same thing of just going, give me a chance. And I did go for a lot of jobs with very little success. But the arts bit was the bit where people went, oh, you're interesting. Yeah. And then they go, oh, but you don't have the experience.
Yeah, I was wondering about that part because you came into that later in your career.
GHD, they were like, well, you wouldn't want to do a grad role. And I was like, yes.
Right, okay.
I'll do a grad role.
Yep.
They knew that I had more experience and skills than that, but that was the way that they could get me in. And I was going to be doing more straight up data analytics. But this little thing of ChatGPT had just arrived, and they needed someone with arts background, creative, use of language, lots of grant writing. Yes. And they went, well, maybe you'll be our prompt engineer. Yeah, you'll be one of the first in the world. Yeah. Run with it.
Fantastic.
But yeah, they were actually up for something creative, but it is a challenge. Oh, and I was going to say the worst, I'll try and finish on this. The best rejection I got was just before I got my current role. Was somebody actually replied with some feedback and went, oh, actually, I can see you've got the skills. You're totally applying for the right level. It was just that the others that made the shortlist all had PhDs. And it was just like, oh. But it was, the encouragement was there to go, I can see from just your cover letter, resume, you've got the skills, keep going.
Yes, so the employment agencies were really starting to recognise all that prior experience and the skills that you had.
Yes. No, it wasn't easy.
No, yeah, but starting to.
The piece of paper does sort of, well, in that case, yeah, the piece of paper is kind of necessary. But the skills were the things that would get me an interview.
Yeah,
so.
For sure. Are there any other questions from the audience?
So I've heard from the clock trit as well as the other skills. Have you discussed how the clock works at the lowest levels of micro-credentialing for like how it might work for kids in the push or Centre for Multicultural Youth? Have you discussed that? Because I was late and I missed it. A little?
Yeah, I might explain a little bit. Yeah.
Sure, of Denise or...
I can explain. I'll just give a bit of a brief, but Denise might want to add to it. But we've been we haven't. It's not quite designed yet, but we have been working with the youth arts partners to actually do some workshops with young people. Claire was one of the participants in our workshop, and with Denise we've designed a series, kind of a workshop that is for participants of youth arts programs to demonstrate their different skills like communication, problem solving, and creative thinking. We have 2 exercises for them that we've been getting them to try out, and then afterwards we've been reflecting and actually getting them to talk about the skills that they've actually used through that process. And I think we attended a skills discovery workshop together, so you're probably a bit familiar with the process. And we also work with the facilitators of the youth arts organisations for them to help us to recognise what someone that's a beginner, a participant or an expert would look like. And so that's all of that work we've been doing with the youth arts partners will underpin the design of the micro-credential sort of framework, which will be turned into an app that Reese actually just demonstrated to us, which will help the facilitators to assess their young musicians or young artists that they're working with. Yeah. But did you want to add something to that?
No, but what's great is that people are using the language now. So you've got settled new joiner, which actually didn't exist before this conversation and this process. And so it's part of the community of practice. So that language is very clock. It finds the language that can express through the community what's going on, and to be able to label that, and then people then adapt their way of thinking to include. So we're constantly moving towards more and more inclusion at different levels.
I'd just like to invite Anna Ikemudi back on if she's there.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Anna. Would you like to make a few concluding comments? We're sort of in the last few minutes of our talk now.
We're very grateful for everyone's engagement. I realise that time, is hard to come by and we have a lot of demand. We're really, really keen for other partners. So if you know people that you think, they might be small to large businesses, we have quite a strong relationship with Deloitte in Australia, but we're looking for future partners. So other employers and pathways to employment services, we would really love to grow our network. Please reach out. And both, across Australia. Obviously, I'm working also in Europe at the moment with Denise, and we're really keen to develop ways of accrediting know-how and practical skills, not necessarily a sort of academic skills only. So just an open invitation really to reach out if you think that you might have some capacity to be involved or might know people with capacity to be involved. And thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Anna. So on that note, we might wrap up our conversation. And I'd just like to thank you all for being here today. And it's been a great event to hear different voices from the arts sector and to have the youth voices here with us. And thank you, Denise, for that wonderful presentation, and Reese as well for your demonstration. Thank you, everyone.